Ready to level up your leadership? This is the Growth Project. Welcome back to the Growth Project, everyone. Welcome to our recap of 2023. What a year. We made it. We made it, everyone. It's been a great Christmas break for me. Nice and relaxing, just what I needed. It's been a hectic year, and I know that a lot of you are in the same boat as well. It's been really intense, and what a great handful of days just to decompress from the year, reflect, do nothing for a change. I know that's not everyone's Christmas experience, but for me, it's been really relaxing, really chill, which is a good thing considering how busy things were this year. And I thought it would be a really great idea just to recap on the year. Year number one for me on this podcast. So this was just a big, silly idea that I had at the start of the year to get ideas out of my head and out to people who might find it interesting. And it's been really rewarding actually for me, not only because it's accelerated my growth, it's helped me accelerate in learning more about the concepts that I talk about, accelerating my leadership growth. And I've seen people around me accelerating their leadership growth as well. And I've worked with a lot of people who are pursuing growth from a leadership perspective as well. So it's been a really inspirational year from that point of view. And I'm really excited to keep doing that next year. So I thought what I'd do is just recap each of the episodes briefly and just recap on some of the key takeaways. So the first episode that I did was around the foundations of leadership and just some 5 core concepts that I believed were the foundations for effective leadership. And that's a good one to start with, I think. If you're just new to this podcast, this is a good one to start because sometimes when we're in a blue-collar environment and we're stepping into a leadership role, it can be really overwhelming as to where to start. But sometimes it's just the most important thing to do is just to get your feet firmly in the ground and figure out what your values are and why it is that you're becoming a leader and what you want to achieve as a leader. That was a really good one to start. And I'm not going to go too much into that one, but start with that one if you're new to this podcast. And then you can pretty much go back and forth to any episode after that. It won't really matter. The first guest that I ever had was my good mate, John Granat, for the Are You OK discussion. And we really spoke about mostly the importance of checking in on people and the impact that can have on somebody who might be having a hard time, whether it be something at work or personal. Really important discussions there. And there were some great takeaways from that one, like just the importance and the impact it can have on checking in with somebody if you perceive that they might be struggling with life or with work, any kind of problem, and whether or not that manifests in anything or not was irrelevant. What we discovered and what we spoke about was the importance of just checking in, because that in itself can make all the difference to someone. That led really nicely into the next episode I did, which was why trauma-informed frontline leaders get better results. And that was with Nichole Myles. And with that episode, we spoke about the impact and how trauma can manifest or show itself in the workplace and how that can be causing certain situations that we find ourselves in, whether it be conflict or really tense, difficult situations. And we put links between those situations and trauma and some really simple things that leaders can do to make these situations easier for people to navigate. So that's a really good one if you think that might be a factor in your workplace. That led into an episode around how to keep your cool during conflict. And what we spoke about in that episode is a little bit of brain science and how the brain works and influences our behaviors and reactions to hard conversations. That one is one that I often share with people who ask for advice from me about how to handle hard conversations with people, because that's one of the hardest things that we do as leaders, isn't it? Is having those hard conversations, because emotions get involved. We are human. You can't avoid that. And there were some really simple techniques on how to manage emotions, whether it be the emotions of the other person or the emotions of yourself. We spoke about the amygdala hijack, and these techniques were really simple, easy to implement, and so really worth going back and checking that one out again if you think that that's still relevant for you. The next episode after that was rupture and repair. So that was the perfect topic to come off the back of the episode around keeping your cool during conflict, because sometimes the conversations, as we know, they just don't go to plan. We have we know the skills to use, but maybe we haven't practiced them enough to have the stamina that it takes. So when we have these conversations that derail, we spoke about the importance of having a repair conversation and some simple techniques or tips how to do that. And so that was a really good pairing with that one. We spoke about the power of I statements in difficult conversations. So this is a technique that I really promote a lot when it comes to upholding boundaries or respectfully confronting an issue or somebody on a behavior, for example, or drawing a line in the sand really respectfully in a effective manner. And there were some really basic tips in that one on how to use those and how they might relate to blue collar environments and contexts. So often when something doesn't go to plan, we can lose our cool, we can lose our temper. That can show itself during these hard conversations, and that tends to set the tone for the conversation. And we have an exchange with the other person that is not productive and is damaging to the trust in that relationship. So the I statement we unpacked was really an effective tool on how to have those conversations more productively, taking the judgment out of these conversations, which has the tendency to flare up emotions in the other person. So go back to that one if you find yourself having a hard time talking about problems or situations with people where you might need to give some feedback, or you might need to uphold a boundary or something to that effect. We then had a guest, Chad Murdoch, around mindset and emotional intelligence for blue-collar leaders. And Chad was a small business owner, if you might remember. And we spoke a lot about the daily challenges of leadership in a blue-collar environment. And Chad shared some of his insights on how he navigates certain situations. And I found that really valuable. And a lot of people I know found that really valuable as well. In fact, so much so that it's still our number one listened episode. And so that one seemed to really resonate with everybody. So definitely planning to have Chad back on the show in the new year. Shout out to Chad. Get ready, mate. We're coming back for you. So there has been a couple of requests to get Chad back as well. So that will be happening hopefully early in the new year, folks. So stay tuned for that one. But if you're a blue collar leader or you're a small business owner, operator, give that one a listen. Okay. So Chad's a really relatable guy, really nice guy, and had some really good insights around mindset and how you can best prepare yourself for situations. He also really touched on certain topics like flipping the lens and the perspective and giving perhaps employees an insight on what it's like to be a small business owner, because he thought that might be helpful for people to hear when going into hard conversations from the other perspective. So give that one a listen. That was really good. Then we had Natasha Hanna. We spoke about bridging the legalities and humanity when it comes to managing employment. Natasha Hanna is a business lawyer, and I had worked with Natasha in the past. We've worked with her a few times now on some projects, and she brought some expertise around some of the legal issues that we might find ourselves in if we don't manage situations effectively. The idea behind that episode really was to give you an insight into where things can go if we aren't managing issues effectively in the workplace as leaders, and some really simple tips and tricks on how to avoid some of those pitfalls. So that one was really valuable. So for anyone who's in a leadership position, or especially business owners, that one's critical listening as far as I'm concerned. And you'll find some really helpful resources as well, and some contact details on how to get in touch with Natasha at In-House Nouse. Then we spoke about feedback and how to give feedback effectively. This one here is really powerful to have a grasp on as a leader. Not only can this take the sting out of having the difficult task of giving constructive feedback, that can be a big challenge for a lot of people, and they derail often. But we looked at some really simple techniques, and in particular the SBI model for giving feedback. We discovered that that was a really versatile method of feedback, given that it can be used for constructive feedback and for positive feedback or praise. And when combined with the way that we give feedback, in the sense of whether we're giving effort-based feedback or intelligence-based feedback, you might recall that intelligence-based feedback was feedback like, you are good at XYZ, you're really good at that, you're not so good at that. And we spoke about the opposite side of that, where we focus on the effort applied for the feedback. And these were some concepts that I'd heard from Dr. Andrew Huberman from the Huberman Lab podcast. And what I found fascinating from that episode was where they did some significant studies on methods of giving feedback. And they took two groups of people. One group of people were given intelligence-based feedback, and the other group of people were given effort-based feedback. And what they found was that the people who were given effort-based feedback showed a much stronger growth mindset tendencies, and the other group showed quite the opposite. They really limited themselves on what they believed they could do, and the tasks they chose to tackle were significantly simpler consistently than the people who were given effort-based feedback. So when we've spoken about this with our clientele, this one has particularly resonated strongly, and we can see why. Because what happens is that it tends to not only make it easier to have these conversations, but it also provides some additional benefits, like people starting to self-improve, people starting to self-problem solve. And that's something that we really strive for to have as a leader in our teams. Then we spoke about neurodiversity, and we just looked at neurodiversity from a different perspective and really focused on how we can embrace neurodiversity for our benefit in the workplace, and the fact that it gives us so much more diversity of thought and ideas and many more angles for problem solving and innovation. And that one, for anyone, especially as a parent, where this topic is definitely relevant, not only in the workplace, it was really relevant for personal perspectives as well. Then we spoke to Tersia Woodenberg and about community consciousness. And I guess this one was really sort of open range discussion. And we spoke about mental health in the workplace and the importance on placing value on monitoring mental health, and some really simple things we can do and ways we can have certain conversations to remove some of the stigma around mental health in the workplace. We spoke about how critical emotional intelligence is in the workplace and for leaders, and the fact that sometimes, we don't see that growth and development happening for people who are put into leadership positions. And so from that perspective, that was a really important one to listen to. Then we had our first offshoot episode looking at exploring topics that I just find interesting. And the first one was whiskey. And I work with, again, this was with John Granat, and I work with John, and he has a very keen interest in whiskey, and he knows a lot about whiskey, a lot about the whiskey making process, and he gave us a guided tasting for 4 different whiskies, and that was a really fun fascinating episode, and that one is good for a laugh if you're just looking for some lighthearted fun. And then we had an episode on the audit process, and I guess some advice and tips on being audited and how to navigate that experience and take it positively and draw positives from the situation, and how to manage the situation where we think things might not be going smoothly as the person being audited. And there's going to be the opposite perspective on this one. We're going to explore this topic more in the new year around conducting audits effectively, because I know that there's a lot of our listeners who often conduct audits as well as being the subject of an audit themselves. So we spoke about some of the terminology and things to expect from an audit situation. And we spoke about the way that we might handle the conversation if we feel like the audit isn't being conducted fairly, or there are some issues, whatever they may be, and how we might handle that situation whilst maintaining an effective relationship with the auditor, because it is important that they are able to do their job as well, but the audit reflects fairly what the findings really truly are. So like I said, we will be doing an episode soon on conducting the audit effectively. Then in our last episode, this was a really big one, we had the world-renowned conflict expert, Kwame Christian, who also happens to host the world's #1 negotiation podcast, Negotiate Anything. And Kwame gave us the insights around the fact that conflict is inherently uncomfortable, and the fact that we need to expose ourselves to these kinds of conversations to become more proficient. When we become more proficient and build these skills that we need to navigate difficult conversations, they won't become easy, but they will become easier. And they won't be comfortable, but they will be more comfortable. And these are all tips that anybody can implement. They are zero cost. They just take a bit of time and effort to build. So, and we also announced in that episode the strong possibility of Kwame hosting some conflict workshops in Australia late in 2024. So keep ears to the ground for that. And we'll certainly announce those details as they become available throughout the year. And we spoke about the possibility of doing a follow-up episode with Kwame whilst he's here in Australia late next year. So keep your ears peeled for that. So that's really, I guess, a brief recap on everything that we spoke about this year. And for me, this has definitely helped and accelerated my growth, because when I put these episodes together, there's a lot of research that goes into it. There's a lot of note writing that goes into it. And there's a lot of learning that comes from that. So like I said in my first episode, is that I'm not professing to be an expert in blue collar leadership. I think I've got some great experience and insights to offer, but part of this concept of doing this podcast is to facilitate my growth as well. And it's just documenting it as I go. So I have had huge benefit from doing this, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me about the podcast and really enjoyed certain things. And I've had people who have reached out and said, wow, that episode was fantastic. It really helped me with a situation at work or a situation at home. And that's just so rewarding. But I'm just enjoying it too. I enjoy playing with the technology. It's allowed me to get some toys as well, which I love. And so it's giving me lots of benefits. But for me, the biggest benefit is the exchanges I've had with people where they've explained that they've had benefits from listening to the content. So I really appreciate the support in my first year on this podcast. And I'm looking forward to some really great things next year, more fantastic topics, more fantastic guests, and even exploring the idea of some premium content where for a small price we might have access to some micro learnings, which will benefit people who are on their leadership journey, and really, I guess, exploring some of the key content topics that we speak about here on the podcast. Really core skills, and we'll try and make that really accessible to people, and obviously some benefits to people who are regular listeners of the podcast. So from my perspective, I'd like to thank everybody for listening in during the year, and let's keep it going. Definitely we'll be hitting the ground running early in the year with more episodes. And let me tell you too, I'm keen to get more people involved in the podcast as well. I've got a lot of people who I've got some back and forth going with. It can be really hard to line up schedules sometimes, whether I'm out of the state, traveling for work, and vice versa. Same with people I'm communicating with for interviews. But yes, there are definitely interviews in the pipeline that were intended for 2023, but just wasn't able to happen. They will be coming in 2024. But if you would like to be involved in the podcast, reach out, jason@growthproject.com.au, or find me through Instagram, Facebook, send me a message, reach out, tell me what it is you'd like to speak about, and we'll get in touch and have a chat. Don't hold back. Get involved. Let's have some fun with it. So I hope it's been a productive year for everybody. I hope you're getting some rest at this point in the year, and I look forward to connecting with you all and putting more content out in the new year. 2024 should be a big one. Stay well, stay safe, and look after your teams. There you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of The Growth Project. I'm really enjoying the interaction, so please keep the messages and emails coming through. Keep an eye out for our upcoming Frontline Leader Mindset workshops at entertrain.com.au. They're in Sydney and Melbourne, and of course, you can reach out to request a private, customized workshop for your team. Again, that's entertrain.com.au. That's ENERTRAIN.com.au. What would really help us send our leadership insights far and wide is 5-star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or even just share the show with your network, family, and friends. Until the next episode, look after yourself and look after your teams.